from this computer. And now I'm going to hit start webinar. Hello, everybody. It's 1 o'clock. We're just going to wait 1 minute to allow participants to this webinar to log on. People are logging on as we speak. Okay, thank you everyone for being with us today. This is the September installment of the San Joaquin Valley Regional Early Action Planning Workshop Series. I'm Michael Segala, urban planner based in Fresno Clovis area. I work on the REAP program along with my colleague Robert Phipps, who's on your screen. Robert, can you say hello?
Hello.
Robert is the Deputy Director at the Fresno Council of Governments. Let's see. Thank you again for calling in. I just want to raise a few house rules here. If you have a question, you can use the raise your hand function. You can use the question and answer option or the chat option. We'll probably hold all questions till the end of the presentation by Housing and Community Development. This is a 1 hour workshop. Shouldn't go beyond 1 hour today. And APA CM credit is available. I'll send a link in the chat for the number once we get started here. And all information from this workshop, a video of it and the materials, PowerPoints, will be posted to the SJV REAP website, which is sjvcogs.org/REAP, and we'll post that as well. So let's go ahead and get started. First, we'll spend about 5 minutes talking about the REAP program in the Valley, then we'll turn it over to our esteemed panelists today to talk about the Prohousing program. Prohousing program will be very beneficial to your cities. Points are very hard to get in some of these competitive programs from HCD. And so any point you can get for your developers in your city is a big win for you. So we hope that you're interested in and go through with the process. A little bit of background here. Regional Early Action Planning, the REAP program, was allocated almost $19 million to the San Joaquin Valley Regional Planning Agencies for housing planning and housing planning activities related to the 6th cycle of the Regional Housing Needs Assessment and housing element processes. A 24-member San Joaquin Valley REAP Committee for Housing has been established to guide this effort, and those are the members by county that you see on your screen there, mostly elected officials who meet about two to three times a year to guide this effort.
Right. So in terms of what REAP is eligible to do, what it was intended to do, its primary purposes are kind of twofold. One is to provide a better methodology for the regional housing needs allocation or assessment arena, and also to, of course, further housing production and specifically affordable housing production. So we have in the San Joaquin Valley, we have been handling that primarily through 3 different categories of expenditures, if you will. The RENA angle, which is primarily through the COGS, specific sub-allocations to jurisdictions, and then our valley-wide work efforts, of which this is one, this series of workshops that is intended to benefit all jurisdictions, all 70 jurisdictions throughout the valley. Next slide, thank you. Right, so Fresno COG, Fresno Council of Governments in particular, serves as the fiscal agent for the REAP effort. And you can see the kind of the breakdown, nearly $19 million in total across the valley. So far, we have received roughly a little more than half of that funding, including the entire valley-wide apportionment, which we're in the process of using as we speak. Again, this being one of those examples. Initial sub-allocations have already gone out as well through the 8 metropolitan planning organizations and regional transportation planning agencies in the valley. Go ahead. So, how are those funds? What is the eligibility of those funds? How may they be used? There's the potential there for things that are as kind of creative as establishing a housing trust fund. Certainly efforts to streamline the development process. This is the common thread, of course, being planning. The REAP funds in particular are intended as planning funds, and so not exactly implementation, but updating zoning codes, planning, infrastructure planning and development, supporting local jurisdictions impacted by COVID-19. All of these would be eligible expenses in preparation for RHNA and updating the housing elements accordingly. Go ahead. So again, we talk about the potential for technical assistance. Certainly, that is a major component of that we really try and shop with the valley-wide effort. That we're here to serve you. And our program, the valley-wide program in particular, has quite a bit of money set aside for technical assistance programs. So if you have needs, we're going to ask you to reach out to us. We'll have more information on that on contacts at the end. But in general, anything that is RHNA or housing element related is covered. Technical assistance, temporary staffing, which is often, we think, overlooked, that our jurisdictions are often short on staffing. You can use REAP money to hire people if you need to. Of course, it's it has a limited time element, but it is available. There's some funding for administration. So just a variety of eligible activities. In terms of ineligible uses, obviously anything related to housing production, because this is planning money. Anything that would hinder housing production or be counterproductive. Capital financing, these are things that are not allowed. But again, anything within the planning realm is pretty well open game. HCD, to their credit, has been very, very flexible, for which we're most appreciative.
So for more information on the San Joaquin Valley REAP program, you can go to the webpage noted here on the bottom. And we do also have a technical assistance form for cities to fill out and to check the box for types of activities that they would like. We have 4 consultants under contract to provide assistance valley-wide to all 70 jurisdictions. So if you're interested in receiving help, please go to that form on our webpage and sign up, and we'll contact you. Again, this is the third workshop of our annual workshop series for this program. Last month was ADUs, next month is RHNA. We do have a date and time for the RHNA workshop next month, and I will send the registration link in the chat box as well. So lots of good informational workshops coming up. Robert and I's contact information is here. And we encourage you to also work with your MPO or your COG representatives, because they're in charge of the local money to assist you in this program as well. And that's their contact information there. Again, this PowerPoint is posted and will be posted to the website. So with that, I'm going to ask Reed to share his screen. And we can start with the HCD presentation on pro-housing. I will mention Chelsea Lee and Paul McDougall are also with HCD and are on the call as well to provide additional feedback. While Reed's queuing that up, I'll read a little bit about Reed and Janice, our panelists. Reed grew up in the foothills east of Sacramento, has been with HCD since 2019. Reed joined HCD after working at the Placer County Community Development Resource Agency through the AmeriCorps Civic Spark program. In addition to his role on pro-housing at HCD, Reed provides ongoing support to jurisdictions who have applied for the Early Action Planning Grants Program, technical assistance on ADU, on the state ADU law, and draft and adopted housing element review and analysis of proposed housing legislation. So thank you, Reed, for coming on. Janice Sandage is also with Housing and Community Development. She is a Bay Area native and has been with HCD for just under 1 year as a program analyst. She joined HCD after many years in the human services sector to learn and participate in California's effort to create sustainable housing. At HCD, Janice provides ongoing support to the Early Action Planning Grant programs, and as a member of the pro-housing team, she believes pro-housing to be one of the most tangible policies in encouraging housing growth in California. So with that, Reed and Janice, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. Thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here and would like to thank all of you who are with us today to learn more about the Pro-Housing Designation Program. This presentation will provide an overview of the Pro-Housing Designation Program, which will include information on the mechanics of application scoring, general guidance on how to apply for the program, project timelines, and our expectations of applicants. There will be a short Q&A session with our pro-housing manager, Chelsea Lee, and our technical assistance and incentives program chief, Paul McDougall, at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. So we will begin with a general overview. The Pro-Housing Designation Program originated from AB 101, the 2019 to 2020 Budget Act, in which legislature tasked HCD with developing emergency regulations in response to calls for immediate action to address the state's housing crisis. HCD was charged with creating a program that recognizes local jurisdictions that go above and beyond in accelerating housing production and ensuring all Californians have safe, affordable homes in vibrant, inclusive, and sustainable communities. Pursuant to the emergency regulations, only local jurisdictions may apply to the Pro-Housing Designation Program. Jurisdictions include any city, county, and charter city or county. Local jurisdictions may identify pro-housing policies that are or will be carried out in partnership with local public entities, as defined in Health and Safety Code Section 50079, where the pro-housing policy will have a direct effect on land use or development within the applicant's jurisdiction. Partnerships shall be formed pursuant to legally binding agreements. Through the program, local jurisdictions that apply for and receive pro-housing status are awarded additional points or application processing preference when they apply for a variety of state funding programs that further housing, equity, transportation, and climate goals. We'll expand a bit on this a little bit later. I like to think of pro-housing as the key that unlocks the door to all of these funding stream opportunities. The process of developing the program has been a 2-year effort in which HCD solicited input through a robust public participation process, which included feedback from multiple program collaborators and through various means of communication with external stakeholders. Beginning in 2019, a framework paperwork and survey was distributed to interested parties that solicited input on initial conceptual approaches and principles of the program. followed by a webinar and continuous input and feedback on the design of the emergency regulations, as well as the application itself from our program collaborators. HCD will also be conducting very robust outreach for program implementation. Next slide, please. Okay. Program collaborators included the following entities you see on this slide, and from a variety of backgrounds, including developers, educational institutions, planners, state departments, advocates, builder associations, and housing consultants. Next slide, please. From the beginning, HCD has integrated the core principles into the design of the emergency regulations that you see here. These regulations include designed for flexibility, adaptable, address broader state goals, achievable but effective goals, reflects and builds on previously legislated policies, rewards jurisdictions exceeding the law. Next slide. As HCD has moved towards the actual design of the Prohousing Designation Program process, we have focused on the following principles of increasing development capacity, variety, streamlining, planning consistent with state priorities, promote equitable communities, collaborate to align policies and programs, implementation of relevant housing statutes. Next slide. Now I will turn it over to my colleague Reed, who will be discussing the threshold and scoring requirements of the program. Take it away, Reed.
Thanks, Janice. Yeah, so I'll start off with just kind of going over the threshold requirements. So in order to be eligible for the Prohousing Designation Program, applicants must demonstrate that they satisfy these threshold requirements in accordance with Section 6604 of the emergency regulations. Applicants must have one, an adopted compliant housing element, two, submitted or will have submitted a legally sufficient annual progress report prior to receiving the Prohousing designation. And then three, they have to complete on or before relevant statutory deadlines, any rezone program or zoning that's necessary to remain in compliance with Government Code Section 65583, Subdivision C1, relative to making sites available to satisfy the arena for the current planning period. And finally, they have to be in compliance with all other applicable state housing law. This would include, but is not limited to, no net loss law, the Housing Accountability Act, state density bonus law, laws relating to the imposition of school facilities fees or other requirements, least cost zoning law, the Housing Crisis Act of 2019, and any anti-discrimination law. And as well, HCD reserves the right to revoke a designated jurisdiction status for failure to stay in compliance with these threshold requirements. So even if you do receive the designation, it can be revoked if you don't stay in compliance. So I'll move on to the general scoring requirements. So this is kind of just a broad overview. In order to qualify for the Prohousing designation, local jurisdictions have to achieve a minimum of 30 points on the application, with a minimum of 1 point per each of the 4 categories. And the 4 categories are in the kind of middle circle, and they are favorable zoning and land use, acceleration of housing production timeframes, reduction of construction and development costs, and providing financial subsidies. Each menu item is awarded between 1 to 3 points, and additionally, jurisdictions have the opportunity to gain bonus points through enhancement factors, the enhancement factors category in the 3rd circle. And these enhancement factors include, but aren't limited to, rezoning and other policies that result in a net gain of housing capacity, while also mitigating development impacts on or from environmentally sensitive or hazardous areas. Policies that target community and economic development investments to improve lower opportunity areas identified in the TCAC and HCD opportunity maps, and disadvantaged communities per SB 35. And three, policies that use a multifaceted strategy to promote multiple planning objectives, such as efficient land use, access to public transportation, affordable housing, climate change solutions, and hazard mitigation. And then these next few slides are just kind of examples of different activities that can be awarded points in the different categories that I listed on the previous slide. So we'll start off with favorable zoning and land use. So in this instance, cities would be awarded 3 points for rezoning sufficient sites to accommodate 150% or more of regional housing needs by total or income category. They get 3 points also if they can permit missing middle housing units. So that could be, it could look like allowing more triplexes, fourplexes, sixplexes, or cottage courts, things like that. And they could get 2 points for eliminating or reducing parking requirements, also known as parking minimums. You can also establish parking maximums within the development code. And within the context of accelerating production and permitting timeframes, we give 3 points for establishing ministerial approval processes, 2 points for documenting how you're streamlining housing development, and an additional point for processing ADUs in multifamily housing and deed restricted affordable housing. One example of this comes from the city of San Diego, who created a density bonus for ADUs, where they allow 2 on a single family lot instead of 1, when 1 is deed restricted for moderate and low income households. So here's some examples of factors that can reduce construction and development costs. So the first one, we get 3 points for impact fee waivers or reduction, 1 point for promoting innovative housing types that reduce costs, reducing transportation related infrastructure costs, pre-approved or prototype plans for missing middle housing types, yeah, so for like on the third bullet point, there's one menu item that specifically awards points for creating protected bike lanes, expanding sidewalks, and taking other actions to encourage micromobility and car share programs that reduce the need for vehicle ownership. This menu item also lines up with local initiatives tied to Vision Zero, and also gives you extra points for facilitating the overlap with other elements in the general plan, such as the circulation element and the safety element. So in the context of providing for financial subsidies, we award points for establishing local housing trust funds, developing ADU grants and low interest loan programs, facilitating land donations through the surplus land program, creating enhanced infrastructure financing districts. And one example of the third bullet point to reduce the costs of developing ADUs, the city of San Jose facilitated a public-private partnership guaranteeing 0% interest loans for financing the permitting and construction of ADUs. So those are kind of examples of the point scoring system, different programs or activities that jurisdictions can do to receive this designation. So now I'll go into kind of the benefits of receiving the designation. Once a jurisdiction receives the designation from HCD, it can then receive additional points and/or preference in application processing from the following programs that are on the slide here. The Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, or AHSC, the Transformative Climate Communities Program, or TCCP, and the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program, or IIGP. The IIGP program is administered by HCD, whereas the TCCP and AHSC grants are overseen by the Strategic Growth Council. It's important to note that all of these grants are awarded on a competitive basis. Thus, the Prohousing Designation Program will be one of the primary ways to gain an early advantage on access to these programs. We understand that many of you may have questions about how bonus points will be structured and allocated for these 3 grant programs thus far for jurisdictions that are applying that are designated pro-housing. This is kind of to be determined, but HCD has left a lot of flexibility in terms of program design for this conversation. So those are kind of the formal benefits of receiving the pro-housing designation. There are also informal benefits to being designated pro-housing, and that's the ability to weigh in with feedback on the program implementation as we move forward. We consider jurisdictions that become designated pro-housing as active and collaborative partners to HCD as we move forward in program implementation. The program could also expand to other housing and non-housing funding sources in the future. So it's also good to keep that in mind. And so this is kind of an example of how application would be scored. This is an example of a jurisdiction that submitted kind of a draft application, and the different activities in each section reflect that. So the total has to be over 30 points. They got 30 points plus the additional enhancement factors. And they had a point in each section, so 10 points in zoning and land use to accommodate 150% or greater of current or draft RENA, plus the missing middle activity, the density bonus, and reducing parking requirements. And then accelerating housing production. They added streamlined approvals, seeker streamlining, reduction on permits and hearings, and then reduce costs, waiving impact fees, promoting universal design and innovative housing, financial subsidies. They had a housing trust fund, ADU grants, subsidy pool, and using money from the general fund. So these are just kind of a few examples of the scoring system. And I think now I'll hand it back over to Janice to go over the kind of timeline of where we are on the pro-housing program. Thank you.
Thank you, Reed, for providing those benefits for pro-housing and some example scoring. So to talk about the timeline, a huge milestone for us earlier this year was that the pro-housing emergency regulations were approved and adopted. And we were able to post the pro-housing application on our website. And if the website is there, provided in our PowerPoint there. The state adopted the program as emergency regulations in response to the housing crisis, but program will also now go through a more extensive public process to become non-emergency regulations to be completed in the coming year, which I'll discuss a little more on the next slide. There should be almost no change or difference between the adopted emergency regulations and the proposed non-emergency regulations that will be adopted in the near future. In the meantime, the application and supporting materials are available on our website, and HCD will review applications over the counter and provide technical assistance to jurisdictions as requested. Any technical assistance questions can be directed to our link here in the slide, Prohousing Policies at hcd.ca.gov. Applications will be reviewed over the counter and approved on a rolling basis. Next slide, please. Thank you. As alluded to in the last slide, the state adopted this program as emergency regulations in response to the housing crisis. The program is going through an extensive public process to become non-emergency regulations over the next year. We will have a 45-day public comment period that begins upon regulation posting. While these regulations will be pretty much identical to the emergency regulations, we welcome and encourage any feedback you can provide. Please send all comments to prohousingpolicies@hcd.ca.gov. And as also previously mentioned, this program in many ways is designed to be flexible and open to both incorporating feedback from stakeholder and applicants. And implementing any changes that we see in state housing law. In total, HCD will have 360 days from the adoption of the emergency regulations to make the conversion into normal, regular regulations. Next slide, please. Okay. Regional, sub-regional, and county level technical assistance workshops will be provided as requested. Our goal is to solicit input, receive feedback, and provide specialized technical assistance to all types of jurisdictions, such as rural or under-resourced. And a reminder that much of this program will be new and evolving, and HCD will adjust and adapt accordingly. We have already received interest from jurisdictions in becoming the first designated pro-housing jurisdiction. In the individual technical assistance that we mentioned will be available on a first come, first served basis and based on our capacity. We look forward to receiving your application and from hearing from you. Next slide, please. Thank you for attending this presentation. If you have any additional questions after our time ends here today, we will have a brief Q&A session, but if there's anything else, feel free to contact us anytime, again, at our prohousingpolicies@hcd.ca.gov email box. You can also find all the pro-housing resources you'll need on our HCD Pro-Housing webpage, as seen there on our slide. And be sure to follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janice and Reed, very well. And for our city partners on this webinar, if your city is not a pro-housing city, it's going to be very competitive for your projects to secure funding through some of these major programs that they highlighted. So I encourage everyone to pursue this if possible. This is the first sub-regional workshop by HCD on this program. So San Joaquin Valley was first. We hope that we brought the information to you in a pleasant manner. I have lots of questions, but I'm not a registrant, so I'm going to look at our raised hands or chat, our question and answer box. I do not see any. Robert, how do you suggest we handle this?
Well, Michael, do you have any questions of your own that you want to ask?
Yes, you said, can you clarify, a city has already applied, a city has applied in California for this?
Yes, the city of Sacramento has applied for designation, and we have a couple cities that are working on their applications right now.
And is the application very difficult if I'm a city?
We've tried to streamline the process behind the application as much as possible. I don't think it will be too onerous of a lift. A lot of the work is just from the city side, just taking a look at the policies that you have established or thinking about establishing that fit into this program, and then self-scoring yourself on that application. I think I get 2 points here, I get 3 points here. And then providing that documentation, and then we'll take a look, we'll review it. And part of the process is, it's an over-the-counter application. So, HCD, we're here to, be active partners in this. We're here to provide ongoing technical assistance. And we've in fact done that with City of Sacramento in going through their application. So, you're not expected to have all the answers. We'll help you get there. So definitely encourage folks to take a look at that application on our website.
So we do have a couple of questions now in the, oh, okay, it looks like Paul is answering this one. What type or examples of TA can HCD provide? I'm applying for the Prohousing Designation Program. This is from Elizabeth Havey. So Paul, I don't know if you want to answer that one live, Paul, as well.
Yeah, I think I can talk much faster than I can type.
Probably easier.
But well, so far our plan is to kind of go up and down the state. We'll probably circle back and set up meetings with each cog in the valley. But after that, we'll shift into kind of a direct assistance mode, where we're, at the least upon request, we'll sit down and we'll help you problem solve through the application. And we might even evolve it beyond that. So just feel free to send us a request and we'll set up a time. And then we'll also be kind of, like I said, we'll evolve the direct assistance over the coming months, but it will likely be in coordination with our TA providers as well, PlaceWorks and team.
Paul, are there going to be any template programs? Like, for example, filling out the application is one thing, but if I'm a city, I know I have to do some local ordinance work on my planning code, for example, to line this thing up. Is there going to be any like template type ordinances or anything like that, programs provided by HCD to help my application move faster?
We don't have templates for every single policy now, but this is a super good suggestion. Let us think about that. I know that we'll want to share as much information as possible. When we get applications, when we get the awards, so folks can kind of see the things that we're counting, things that are going towards being pro-housing. And perhaps we can evolve that into as well as making the ordinances and things like that available. So it's a great suggestion. Just let us step back and think about how we can do that.
And while you're at it, change the land use planning law to make it a lot easier to do these things too for all of our little cities.
We do have another question from Mark Staples. What kind of housing funding does not count or doesn't count toward pro-housing?
I would say by statute, it's the 3 programs that Reed mentioned. However,
Reed, maybe you can take us back to those 3 programs.
Oh, sure. I'll mention them too. It's IIG, Infill Infrastructure Grants. It's the Transformative Climate Communities out of SGC, Strategic Growth Council, as well as HSC, Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities, out of the Climate Communities Investment Fund. With that said, that's the minimum in statute. We are looking to incorporate it in some programs, but that's in progress. We are looking at our own programs on a regular basis where it makes sense, and as well as forging partnerships with other agencies, including non-housing agencies, And, you know, we'll see what comes out of that, but nothing super in stone at this point, but there has been some guidance through some of the transportation investment planning processes.
The next funding round for the HSC program and infill infrastructure is more or less around that same timeline, is like June 2022. Will this pro-housing program be in play for that funding round?
It should be.
Okay.
What form it takes though, you know, that's going to go through a guideline process, so it's not completely cemented. But by statute, it should be.
Okay.
I know that we're in talks with them, have some initial talks with them, with Strategic Growth Council as well as our IIG folks.
Thank
So
you.
again, if you have if anyone has any questions that they'd like to offer verbally,
Yeah.
you know, just raise your hand and we can unmute you. Or
And
put
I
your
just
question-
apologize to Mark for not being more direct. At minimum, it's the inverse of these three at this point, but there will be changes in the future if I was betting correctly.
I have a question. I don't know if you can really answer this or how germane, but with regard to Sacramento being the first pro-housing jurisdiction, number one, that they've applied, that designation has not been granted yet, right? Of course, they've also been in the news a lot lately, you know, for being the first jurisdiction in California to completely do away with the single family zoning designation. Are those two things related? Is that part of their application, or because that hasn't happened yet either? I don't believe, right?
I'm pretty sure it's in play now in their zoning code. They've opened it up.
Oh, has
but,
it? Okay, I didn't think that they had passed that yet.
I mean, we
think
can
they were-
double check that, but some of the kind of the opening up, you know, zoning codes to permit more uses, more housing choices. Certainly, there's fits for that in these point categories.
All right.
Yeah, and so I mean, you're going to see in the point categories, we've tried to broaden it into these four categories that Reed and Janice mentioned. But in each one of those, we try to provide a pretty substantial menu to give that flexibility. And even in each category, there's an all others. And then, you know, as long as you have some pro housing that mark back to the objectives of that category, it's probably going to be a workable situation. So we're just trying to absorb all the unique things that folks are doing up and down the state, including the San Joaquin Valley, to accelerate housing production.
All right.
Paul, should we be talking with HCD about leveraging our REAP funds to help cities apply for this designation? Or is that something HCD is handling on their own with their statewide TA plan?
Sure. I would say there's definitely room for it in the REAP 1.0. You know, to the extent that you're maybe providing additional assistance or model ordinances, or if jurisdictions want to utilize their sub allocations to line up with some of these planning processes and documents to be pro housing, it's a good fit. You know, if we want to kind of make some adjustments on the fly, or even in the maybe the overarching San Joaquin Valley money, we could probably think about some ideas there as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you all know that we're working on our technical assistance plans that was intended to accompany the SB2 planning grants through 2023. We've sent that draft back out and gotten some great comments, and they're in a kind of a state where, you know, if we wanted to put something pro housing in there, we certainly could. And we will not shy away from revisiting those technical assistance plans to make sure that we're nimble and kind of adjusting to changes in circumstances.
Very good. Okay, well, it's okay to end early. I'm not seeing any questions, but once again, panelists, thank you, everyone. Registrants, participants, thank you so much. We look forward to you on the next workshop, RENA, planning for the 6th cycle on October 26th. But until then, have a great day.
Could I since we got just a few extra minutes, there goes Phipps. Never mind, he's gone. He's on, I'm out as soon as
Nope.
possible.
Nope, I'm here.
If we did toss out there the idea of visiting each cog from north to south or south to north, is that something that would be worth our time? Are folks interested in that? Is it okay to toss that out there, Michael?
Sure.
Staples says
Big,
yes.
a big yes,
Okay,
right away.
cool. So perhaps we coordinate through Michael, or we could coordinate through the cogs as well. I don't know, whatever you think appropriate there. Any ideas? Okay.
Yeah, seems like there's support.
Okay, okay. So I think we'll maybe do some initial brainstorming with Michael and Phipps, and then probably reach out to the cogs individually and set up some times to sit down and talk so we can maybe give some more tailored feedback on what you're thinking. We certainly encourage everybody to look at the program as it is now, the application, and if you have questions in the meantime, please let us know. We're here to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Right on. Well, thanks everybody for the participation and the interest, and we're excited to kick this off, right, Janice? That's right.
Yes.
So, and just looking forward to seeing you all soon.
Yep.
Thanks, Paul.
All
Yep.
right, everybody.
All right. Thank you,
Thanks, guys.
everyone.
Take care.
Take care.